What's up, everybody? This is the second episode of the Four Corners podcast. I'm joined by Abraham, and Corbin will be joining us shortly. He's running a little behind, but he'll be with us in a little bit. How you doing, Abraham?
I'm doing well, boss. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So, right off the gate, there was a lot of football that happened this past weekend, and
Yeah.
college football kind of took away everything from the NFL playoffs, and took the air out of that with how all of that unfolded between Georgia and Alabama. Um,
Absolutely.
so I don't know, man. What was your big takeaway from the championship after the Crimson Tide put
Uh,
another one
for
behind them?
me, the biggest takeaway was just that Nick Saban is a genius. I mean, he recruits well. Alabama is always going to be a threat year in and year out.
Right.
No matter how things go in the regular season, you give them a chance in the playoffs, they will show out. They completely manhandled Clemson, and that game versus Georgia. Just watching it, you think that this might be it where we finally see the dragon get slayed once again for the
Yeah.
second time in the past 3 years.
Right.
But man, they just turned it around completely. Part of that, in my opinion, is Georgia's fault, but then part of that is also just the effectiveness of Alabama, of what Saban is able to bring to the table in terms of the players and their philosophy. Because those guys, they could have quit at any point, but they stayed in. And even when you bring in their backup quarterback, Tua. He was spectacular. Um, the biggest thing for me was on that last drive where he takes a sack,
Right.
which you cannot do in overtime, especially when the other team just kicked a field goal and you need to keep it going by at least kicking a field goal, and you take yourself to the fringe of the field goal range, and
And
then
the,
to just
and the way the fourth quarter ended with Alabama missing a kick too,
yeah.
that just kind of,
Oh, Oh
you know,
man, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that. I thought like, here we go. We're gonna get this guy. He's gonna redeem himself, get the kick, be the hero. But nah, he wasn't ready for prime time yet.
I feel bad for that kid. I wonder what his first day
Yeah.
back on campus was like.
Oh man, I feel like maybe he was a little bit forgiven since at the end of the day they still won. We know Tua's definitely the man right now. He's definitely enjoying himself. Everybody's loving what he can do, and it's gonna make things interesting definitely for next season in terms of what Saban is going to do with the quarterback situation.
So yeah, what do you think that means for Jalen Hurts? Getting benched in the first or after the first half of the national title game, and not getting to play that second half, and like you said, how Tua came out and just kind of took over. Uh, is Hurts gonna transfer, or do you see them kind of figuring it out, so to speak,
I
finding a
think
way to make?
I
Because it
think
doesn't seem like they don't they
yeah,
don't have like dislike for each other. It's not, at least
yeah,
not yet.
yeah.
Maybe if Tua
I,
starts half the season, then
this is
maybe that
true.
changes.
The beautiful thing is with us, the spring games, we'll get to see
Right.
uh, what happens. I mean, Saban is not going to choose his clear cut person. Yeah, he's going to let them compete, which is the way to go.
Right.
But we've seen what Jalen can bring to the table, and we've got even though it's only was 2 quarters, we got a glimpse of what Tua can bring to the table. And me personally,
Right.
I think that Tua is definitely the man to choose.
Hmm.
Definitely a better passer, has a better arm than Jalen, and is as good of a runner. Um, but we'll see if Jalen is able to take that next step and improve his passing ability and his accuracy to at least make it a bit more competitive. But if he can't, man, that transfer button, you're gonna have to hit it. You're gonna have to hit it. No other
So
way.
what does this say on the other side of things for Georgia? I mean, this is their second championship disaster, is the best way I can put it. Fallout, I guess, if you want to call it that, of blowing a gigantic lead. You had the Falcons blow a 25-point lead that they had in the third quarter. Georgia had, I believe, a 13-point lead, up 20-7 at one point. I mean, at some point, what are fans in Georgia that love football? What are they going to do with themselves if the Falcons, kind of fumble into the second round and lose it against the Eagles?
I think first, the state of Georgia, I don't think they should panic just yet. I mean, yes, we know the internet will definitely have its time
Right.
and have its moment of making fun of the state, but the internet is undefeated. They can take anything and make a joke out of it. Um, I noticed this loss for the state of Georgia, for Georgia as a whole, was definitely tough, especially since it looked like they had it in the bag. But in terms of the Falcons, I don't think they should feel as disappointed. The Falcons aren't, in my opinion, as dominant or
Yeah.
appear to be as dominant as they were last year. They finished with, I believe, a 10-7, 10-6 record or 9-7 record,
Yeah.
and they've had their moments this season where they showed weakness and they showed their strengths. Um, Against the Rams, we saw a bit of both, and I'm a Rams fan, but I still abide by the fact that if McVay and that offense does what they normally have been doing throughout the season, that game would have been different because the Rams defense was doing what they needed to do. John Hecker, the punter, was pinning them beneath the 10. It was doing great, and the Falcons had to fight for that. I mean, Matt Ryan was getting knocked around a lot, um, and now as they get ready to face the Eagles,
Mm-hmm.
like they'll have some confidence knowing that Carson Wentz is not in the backfield, is not under center. It makes things a little easier for me, especially as a fan of football. I think that the Eagles not having Wentz is a big negative for them. And if I was the Falcons, I would feel a little calmer knowing that, okay, we don't have this quarterback who has been so adept at avoiding the run, getting out of sticky situation, extending plays.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that even if they lose versus the Eagles, it shouldn't be a big reason for concern. Um, it just proves to us that the Eagles are just a better team, which we've seen, but we've always attributed it to Carson Wentz. And if they come out and win it anyway,
Yeah.
it just relays to us that, hey, Nick Foles was able to get it done, and the rest of the team was able to step up because they know they're that good.
So I guess we can jump into the NFL real quick since it kind of transferred there. So who do you have in the Eagles and Falcons game? Who do you have winning?
Man, I need revenge, so I'm going to Eagles. I'm going to Eagles. I want them to shock the world, say, hey,
Trusting in the legend.
we don't need Carson Wentz. Exactly.
You're trusting in the legend of Nick Foles. That's a pretty bold one.
Yeah, we're gonna see a version of
high scoring, low scoring.
Nick Foles.
What do you see happening?
I see it as a high scoring game. I think that the ball is going to be flying a lot. I don't think Nick Foles will be handing it off a lot to Ajayi and Blount. I think he's going to be able to sling it, and we're just going to see two offenses just get after it.
The other NFC game is between Minnesota and New Orleans. They played each other for the NFC back in 2009. Both obviously very different teams, and the Saints have some star rookies. Minnesota's kind of been saved, if you will, by Case Keenum stepping up when Sam Bradford missed time and Teddy Bridgewater not being ready for most of the year. So who comes out that game, in your opinion, between the Vikings and the Saints?
I have to go with the Vikings. I think that defense will step up big time. They've been consistently good all year. And as long as, in my opinion, as long as they're able to contain Kamara and Ingram and force Drew Brees to sling it. Yes, Drew Brees is one of the most skilled QBs in the league in recent memory. He can sling it for 4,000 yards in a season rather easily, but he's also turnover prone, and that Vikings defense is not one you want to mess with. I think Case Keenum continues to do what he's been doing all throughout the season. Not doing too much, just doing enough to keep the offense going. And I think the Vikings win it in a low-scoring game.
Right. I could see that happening. My pick for that game is Minnesota as well. I guess admittedly I'm a little biased since they're my favorite team, but I looking at it's a little bit of a delayed revenge, but the overtime loss in the playoffs when Brett Favre was their quarterback, and everyone thought, oh, Minnesota's gonna, they're gonna win it all, they're gonna dominate, and the Saints came out and said, forget that, we're gonna prove you guys wrong. I think this game will probably be one of the more entertaining, I think, for me to watch, just
Yeah.
because you have Case Keenum, really a legacy moment for a guy that nobody really wanted in the offseason for a while after all the drama in LA and starting over Jared Goff and having to deal with Jeff Fisher and that ugly first year for the Rams in LA. He's really done an excellent job, I'll say, of turning that around and not letting that little stint ruin his career. And the Vikings have found a way to really make that a diamond in the rough, I think. I agree with you, though. I think it will be a low scoring game. If I had to pick a score, I would say Minnesota's probably going to score no more than like 16 points. And the Saints will score probably, I'd say I'll give them 10. Just kind of give them about a one score difference. But real quick on the first game we talked about, I would have to go with the Falcons, and I just don't trust Nick Foles enough. I don't want Atlanta in it again. I'm all for there being some new teams in it, but they're gonna kill. They're not. I guess kills the word I want to use. They're gonna kill the Eagles, and nobody's gonna like it. Everyone's gonna think Philly earned it. They got the top spot in the conference. The Carson Wentz injury just kind of devastated them. But I think that just speaks to really the impact Wentz is going to have if he can stay healthy. Because if they had Wentz healthy and ready to go, I think it wouldn't even be close in favor of Philadelphia. Because of, like you said, how he can really extend plays and be a difference maker.
Yeah.
So I have Falcons winning that one, kind of high scoring for them, 31-10. And then, like I said, Minnesota 16-10. Let's see. Let's jump to the AFC. Do you have anything else you want to add about the NFC matchups before we switch over?
Oh no, I think everything will be good in terms of that. I think we're good on that.
Right on. So jumping then to Patriots and Titans in New England. Mariota of the Titans kind of had a bizarre game against the Chiefs. Tennessee couldn't get anything going. They were down 21-3, and they rallied 19 straight points in the second half. I still had this small hope in me, even when I saw the halftime score. I thought, this kind of is like how Kansas City's season really went, and it turned out to kind of be true. They jump out to this really impressive start, but they can't finish. And Tennessee, it's not like they were dominant over the Chiefs. I didn't feel like they really took it to them even in the second half, but the Chiefs just didn't have enough in the tank to even get a field goal. And I think that shows you how depleted that team really is mentally. And not having a mental edge can kill you in those kind of moments.
Definitely.
But, the Patriots are a whole different monster, and it's on their home field. So do you give the Titans any shot at all, any shot in hell of getting to the AFC Conference Championship?
The only shot they get is if, as one of their defensive players said, they make Tom Brady look like Blake Bortles, or if Gronk gets injured. I mean, it's time and time again we see the Patriots enter the season with controversy or with drama,
Right.
and time again it has not broken them. And the most recent drama is the whole Belichick, Kraft, Brady situation, and
Yeah.
that I just don't see this Patriots team losing to the Titans, especially with what we saw from the Titans throughout this season, and also last week. It's just you don't know what version you're going to get, especially when it comes to Mariota. We've seen potential, we've seen flashes, but we've also seen him causing turnovers, him not able to make plays, and
Right.
when you play the Patriots, you kind of have to play a perfect game. No mistakes, no mental lapses. And I just don't trust the Titans yet with that. So I think the Patriots win this. I think it's not even close. If anything, I'm gonna say a 28-10 game.
Yeah, because with New England, if they can get in a rhythm early, they're kind of hard to stop. And even if you get out ahead of them, as Atlanta knows all too well, they're still dangerous. And even if it takes a miracle, they'll find a way back.
Very true. Very true.
I'm going to take New England as well. I think it might be a little closer than 28-10. I'd say it's like a 24-17 game. But even though it's like a one touchdown differential, in my opinion, still, like you said, I feel like New England's going to have the driver's seat for the whole game from kickoff. Barring some crazy fatigue or flu bug or something insane that we've never seen before, there's no way Tom Brady's going to go out there and be remembered to losing to the Titans at home.
No, exactly.
That's just not going to happen.
No, it's not. That's not how their story will end. I think their story ends with a Super Bowl appearance for sure.
So before they get to the Super Bowl, they'll have to play one more game after Tennessee, assuming they win, and that'll be either Pittsburgh or Jacksonville. And I think, kind of based on the last episode, me taking well, you know who I'm picking. But are you taking Pittsburgh, or are you taking the best defense in football?
I'm gonna, last week with my picks, I think I only hit on one of them. I only hit on one of the four. So you know what? I'm just gonna switch it up and say the hell with it. And I'm predicting a Jaguars upset. In the sense of, that defense is really, really good. One of the best in football. I put them second behind the Vikings just because the Vikings have been more consistent. But what they were able to do versus the Steelers in Week 5, mind you, both teams have definitely grown and developed since then. But they forced Roethlisberger into 5 turnovers, and I think 2 of them were pick sixes.
Yeah, and you had Roethlisberger in the press conference after, really thinking if
contemplating retirement. Yeah,
if that one rings, and
of all
teams, the Jaguars. They have this stigma of being terrible, and I think it's because they never dumped Blake Bortles. And if you put any other quarterback in there, they'll get a little more respect, I feel.
Yeah.
But I was honestly surprised at the fact that Buffalo kept it remotely close, let alone had a lead for a good chunk of the game. But man, I just keep thinking they're going to overlook the Jaguars because they're Pittsburgh. That's just how they are. And they probably want nothing more than a chance at revenge against Tom Brady. So they're probably, thinking Blake Bortles who, and I think that's going to cost him because, that Week 5 game was in Pittsburgh. It wasn't like the Jaguars had home field in that game.
That is true. That's very true.
And they beat them by 3 touchdowns. That's not even close.
Yeah, it was an ugly game. The only bright spot in that game was I think Antonio Brown had over 100 yards receiving. Otherwise, it was just a terrible day for Pittsburgh. And again, the fact that the Jaguars had him contemplating retirement.
Sounds so funny. Like the Jaguars did it to Big Ben. The Jaguars.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. Imagine if the game was in Jacksonville. Those fans would go nuts.
Oh yeah, it would be unreal. So I think the defense is going to show out again. I trust the Jaguars defense wholeheartedly. And those young guys, they just got a lot of energy. They realize that they're good. They realize that they can beat Pittsburgh. So they're not going into the game scared. I think at the end of the day, it'll come down to Blake Bortles. Can you show us that you don't suck? I don't know if you were able to see his press conference. He kind of made a comparison to LeBron. I understood what he was saying, and I didn't disagree with him. It was just interesting.
It was a bit of a stretch. He had a point, but that was still a stretch to say, to try to put yourself in that category. But I mean, you're obviously going to get criticism. I feel like that was kind of like
Honestly.
a no-brainer, but maybe he
Yeah.
felt better putting that out there. But I mean,
Yeah.
fun fact though, real quick. So, and you just mentioned, maybe Blake Bortles stepping up, but he really didn't have to do anything, and his team still won 30-9. He
Yeah.
threw for less than 100 yards and only completed 8 passes,
Yeah.
and he only threw it 14 times, period. And one of those passes was a pick, and they still won by 21 points. So the fact that you can have a crappy Blake Bortles performance and still beat the Steelers,
Again, it's that defense.
I,
That defense
I'm
is
sold. I'm
ridiculous.
sold on Jacksonville. Like I'm not. I don't look at it really as an upset, even though it would be a 3 over a 2 seed. I
Mhm.
would imagine Vegas would be smart on that, but maybe that's just me.
I
Uh,
mean, at the end of the day, you got to realize what this Steelers team is.
right.
They're offensively better. You have
Oh, by
Antonio
far.
Brown,
Oh, by far.
arguably the best wide receiver in the league. Top three for sure. You have Le'Veon Bell, who's one of the best backs in the league, and mind you, Big Ben. Big Ben is still a top tier quarterback. Uh,
Mhm.
the Steelers are a better team, in my opinion. They are a better team.
I just don't
But
think they're going to
again,
win.
yeah, no, me neither. I think that again, that Jaguars defense, as you stated, Blake Bortles didn't really do much in their last meeting versus the Steelers, and they still beat, stomped out Pittsburgh. So that defense, they know what they're capable of. They know they need to make plays, and they make those plays. I think it happens again where we'll see Big Ben throw a couple picks, we'll see a couple turnovers, and that defense is going to
Right.
win them the game.
And the sad part is, though, for them, even if they win in dominant fashion, everyone's going to say, "Oh, the Jaguars made it to the AFC title game," but they're playing the Patriots, so the defense is going to stop here. But if I was going to pick a crazy good defense to try and cut it close, it would be the Jags to try and snuff out Tom Brady. Now I think it's going to be one heck of a battle if we get a Patriots Jaguars game. That's what I'm hoping it is. Because it might even be better than the Super Bowl because of what would be at stake. You're either going to have a young team with rookies on both sides of the ball with Leonard Fournette and then Jalen Ramsey on defense, and you're going to have the legacy of Tom Brady. If you're not going to lose to the Titans, are you really going to lose to the Jaguars?
That's a good point.
Are you going to lose to them at home? Like, is that really going to be how the last era? Perhaps the last playoff game altogether with New England having what they have, the Jaguars.
Yeah,
But I don't
that's a
know.
good point.
Lots of fun to watch for. I would say Jags win in a big game for them. It's at least 28 points in Pittsburgh, and I say the Steelers drop 20.
Sounds good. I like that. I agree with you there in terms of the score.
So now that we got the NFL and college football out of the way, uh, let's pick your brain about basketball. What did you take away this week from all the NBA action? Is there like a team that stood out to you? Any thoughts on that?
Well, first I have to pay homage to my team, the Celtics. They went into London the other day
Right.
and played Philly. Were down by 22 at one point. Came back and won by double digits. This team doesn't quit when they're down. Several times this season, the Celtics have been losing by as many as the most recent being 22 points, but between 15 and 22 points.
Yeah.
And other teams, they get such a big lead like that, entering the third quarter, entering the fourth quarter, they quit.
Right.
The Celtics do not quit. I feel like they're probably 8-1 when they're down by double digits. That was definitely a great performance, especially in a different environment. And the last time the Celtics played in London was exactly 10 years ago. That's when we won our last title. So history seems to be repeating itself.
So you hope. Let's hope you
so
didn't
I
jinx
hope.
that right
So I
there.
hope. Yeah, let me knock on wood. Don't want to jinx
Yeah, no,
but
I like
another
the way you're
takeaway.
thinking, Boston. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And another takeaway is just Cleveland.
That's all you got to say.
Cleveland is always going to get attention. Exactly. They're always going to get that attention, especially since, despite the Celtics' success, at the end of the day, are they good enough to dethrone Cleveland? And
Right.
so when you look at that, you're going to have eyes on Cleveland, see what they're doing, and they've been struggling lately. Um, you know, you've had LeBron kind of spaz out on courtside to his teammates and his coaches. I feel like he's just getting frustrated. But then even tonight, they blew a 20-point lead to the
They
Indiana
were up
Pacers.
22 also against the Pacers, and Indiana came storming back.
If I'm up 22 in any game, I'm gonna feel nervous now. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm not hitting the panic button on Cleveland because we've seen stuff like this before when it comes to Cleveland, how maybe they don't close out the season hot or they go through a stretch of terrible games. And I don't want to overhype my Celtic success, but at the same time, it should be made aware that this Cleveland team, we're already about halfway through the season.
Yeah,
they are not clicking like they should be. Even with the return of IT, yes, he just came back from injury. Yes, it's been about 7 months.
right.
He still needs to get his bearings with him, but he's been struggling regardless. His first game back, he dropped 17 points in 14 minutes. Ever since then, we're getting 0 for 10 performances, 0 for 12 performances. He's struggling, and it doesn't bode well, especially when you have the C's right on your heels in terms of that's a team that's trying to come for your throne.
Right. And so far, they're topping you in the standings. I mean, Boston's not really taking it lightly to have Kyrie Irving and everything that happened with that whole trade from Cleveland and what that really meant for the Celtics is like a huge game changer. It's like, okay, we were around the top of the conference running kind of things going into the playoffs last year, got a scare from Chicago, and then just things didn't really pan out. Now you have Kyrie. Next season, when you get Gordon Hayward back healthy, that's going to be a crazy team to watch. And I think what you're going to see from the Cavs is they're going to realize that they took a huge risk to avoid, more Kyrie versus LeBron type drama in the regular season by just saying, okay, we'll give you Kyrie, give us Isaiah Thomas, even though he's going to need to recover. If this team doesn't figure it out, though, if Cleveland doesn't figure something out soon, I would say within like the next 20 games, you're going to see LeBron's meltdowns gradually get crazier and crazier and crazier. And all it's going to take for the Lakers to really try and make it, really any other team, Philadelphia even, it's going to take them just showing LeBron a little bit of consistency and a little bit to work with, and that's all he's going to need to be able to want to leave Cleveland again. Because if Cleveland just turns into a dumpster fire where you have an overaged Korver, you have a J.R. Smith that's not really doing anything that's changing the game. Tristan Thompson is in trade talks now. Isaiah Thomas, like you mentioned, is going 0 for 12 on some nights. I mean, and I feel bad for LeBron in a way, but at the same time, they kind of asked for it, They didn't try to remedy the situation with Irving and James at all. They just kind of let it go into this whole PR nightmare of he said that or I said this, kind of, pointing fingers. And
yeah, definitely.
I don't know. Cleveland is a tornado.
Yeah,
Washington, I feel, is worse, though. Washington, where you play so good. Stephen A. Smith talked about this the other day on his show. Like, Washington plays so good against good teams. And then you play sub 500 teams and you play like trash. You play like you're not even in the playoff standings, like you're not a top 8 team. And you have all the talent to completely destroy this team you're playing, home or away, and you don't play like it.
Yeah, no, this is definitely true, and they have the pieces in my opinion. They have
no excuse.
The roster. They're just so inconsistent. I don't know whether it's I don't know whether it's just lack of motivation or coaching or what it could be, because John Wall has definitely progressed throughout his career so far. He's always been arguably a top three defensive point guard in the league.
Right.
He can facilitate rather easily. He's always, I don't know his numbers for this season currently, but he's always averaging double digits assists. And Bradley Beal, when healthy, is an offensive problem. He can give teams fits, but it just seems like when they need to play below their level, they just end up burning like a dumpster fire. I mean, I remember when the Wizards played the Celtics Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
They came out guns a-blazing and they were giving it to us. I mean, we fought back and they closed it out well. That's the Wizards team that you can get. But if they can't
be getting every night,
it should be it's consistently. Again, you need to see teams perform like that consistently. Yes, it's the regular season, and people will make excuses that people like to take games off, especially when it comes to when you talk about LeBron and his teams, that they're fine. When they get to the playoffs, it's a different beast. Right. On the one hand, I can agree with that logic, but at the same time, when you have young guys on your team, too, an example of the Wizards, you want to show that consistency throughout the regular season. You don't want that confidence to waver, because Washington doesn't have the luxury of having a LeBron on their team, because LeBron will show up in the playoffs. We've seen LeBron show up time and time again and put the team on his back. Washington hasn't proven that. They don't have that luxury.
Right.
Again, it's why when it comes to the Celtics, I'm so happy to see that consistency, see that fight going on. Because yes, we have the second best record in the league. We're number one in the East. And, some people will be like, oh, well, we'll see what happens come playoffs. Well, what I know what will happen come playoffs is that this team is going to be confident. They're not going to come in second guessing themselves, doubting themselves at all. You have these young guys knowing that they're able to perform at an elite level day in and day out. And they're going to enter the playoffs with that confidence and be ready to face any team. And I'm telling you, we're going to get an Eastern Conference series of Cavs versus Celtics. It will go to 7 games, and it will be a glorious 7 games. I think we're going to see – I think it's going to be better than the finals, than this year's finals. That Eastern Conference Finals series for sure will be better than this year's finals.
I could see that happening. I personally, I love nothing more than a Kyrie game-winning shot in Game 7 over LeBron. That would make headlines. That would be the picture. You'd have people change their Facebook stories or Instagram or whatever, and that would be it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, did you just see this?" And that could be Kyrie's moment. And how ironic would it be if it's like a 3 from the same corner that he shot over Curry in the finals a few years ago? That like you said, that series is going to be bonkers if that does happen. But there are some teams that want to try and get in the middle of that. And 2 teams for me that's really been surprising that are in the mix, I guess, is Toronto and Miami. Toronto kind of, for me, always had that stigma of being more like the Clippers, where you can have a decent or a really impressive regular season, and then come playoffs, nobody shows up. You're a whole different team, but it's for the worse. And I feel like this year the Raptors can be different. If they can get consistent play out of DeMar DeRozan, and he can really step up and be that leader that they need, then I don't see why they couldn't really compete with anybody, at least to the second round. It's just a matter of trying to get between Cleveland or Boston, because that's the matchup everyone's going to want. Everyone's going to want to see if Kyrie can beat LeBron, or if LeBron can even make it to that point in his career, being as old as he is, and having to carry a Cleveland team with the state that they're in. But Miami has found a way to climb the standings into, I believe they're in the top 5 now. fourth if I'm not mistaken, or fifth. And if they keep playing well and Washington keeps playing poorly, it wouldn't shock me to see Miami kind of creep into the top 3 conversation and try to do some damage in the playoffs.
Yeah, I hear you, especially when it comes to Toronto. DeRozan is a top 5 shooting guard in the league, in my opinion.
Right.
He's also definitely improved his offensive game. He's more willing to shoot the 3 ball, which he was not a big fan of in his throughout his career so far. You know, his inside game was his go-to, but now you know he can pull it from beyond the arc, and that's always dangerous. You know, when you have a guy who can get to the rack as well as he can, who can pull up on you, and now you have him willing to start shooting daggers from the 3. Toronto is definitely a team that you have to keep your eye on for sure. And you mentioned Miami, and it's painful for me because we've played Miami twice this season, and Miami has beaten us both times. So I definitely agree with you that Miami has been looking good, and I think they're on a 6+ game winning streak right now, potentially. However, I just don't know whether they can depend on their matchups. Because right now, if the season were to end today, Miami is in the 4th spot, and they will play Washington. And as we already discussed with Washington, they are there. You don't know what you're going to get from them. So I can see Miami definitely winning a series against Washington. But then when it comes to the next round, you look at you look at Miami's roster, and nothing on that roster really puts fear into me when it comes to can they get past the Celtics in a 7-game series? Can they get past Cleveland in a 7-game series?
Yeah.
The reason being that I think they're a piece away, and by a piece, maybe a star away from really causing havoc. You know, I thought that they had a pretty good squad with Goran Dragic, Dion Waiters when healthy, and Hassan Whiteside. But Hassan has been injured throughout this season, and he's just not putting up the numbers and showing that defensive dominance that we've been used to the last few seasons. Justice Winslow, out of Duke, he's been injured this season too. So they're a ragtag team of role players, who are getting the job done so far, definitely, but I don't think it's enough. So we'll probably see some trades come out of Miami to get a star player to really bolster and give them an opportunity. But yeah, Miami is not a team that you should take lightly during the regular season. They are going to give it their best, and that's always dangerous. You don't want to underestimate Miami right now.
How do you feel about how the Western Conference is shaping up?
The Western Conference, I mean, in my opinion, my top 3 before the season started, my top 3 seeds in the West were going to be Golden State, San Antonio, Thunder, then Rockets. The Thunder would be better than they currently are. However, the only thing that I have right is Golden State is number 1 in the West. I didn't think their position was threatened any. As you can see, even when, barring that game against the Nuggets the other day, even when one of their players are injured, currently it's Curry, having KD on that team, they're still just as dangerous. Even when they were losing Draymond, who in my opinion is the heart of the Golden State Warriors with what he brings to the court in terms of his determination, his effort, and just his grit. You know, he's the heart and soul of that team. Even with him out for certain junctions this season, they are still soundly beating teams. It's crazy, you know. It's crazy. The Golden State Warriors, number 1, I'm not worried about them. Number 2, we currently have Houston. I thought they would be good. I didn't think they would be this good. Um, Not that I doubted the pairing of Chris Paul and Harden.
Yeah.
I was just annoyed by the fact that Mike D'Antoni won Coach of the Year for moving Harden to the one, to then the next season moving back to the two to get Chris Paul.
They kind of forced their hand more with that by getting Chris Paul.
Yeah, I'm
Hey,
just
James,
like, wait,
thanks for having a crazy good season. You were in the running for
yeah,
MVP. Go back to your old position.
yeah, you got me Coach of the Year. All right, let me now
Scoot
go
over.
into my decision. Mind you, Chris Paul is definitely an upgrade at the point guard position. Easily, it allows Harden to play more loose. Although he's been out due to injury, but Chris Paul is playing like he has something to prove. And I totally get that. I mean, when you look at Chris Paul as throughout his career, he's an elite point guard, no question. Back when he was in New Orleans, he was an explosive point guard. And after the knee injuries, he changed his game to become more of a floor general, who can still pull up and score when he needs to. But the knock against him throughout his career is just that he's not able to get to the Western Conference Finals. He's not able to take that next step. And I think right now he's trying to show that he can.
I'm still not convinced that he'll get it to that point, even with Houston, just because I feel like that something will happen, an injury or something crazy always seems to happen when Chris Paul is involved. I mean, all those years in LA and you had a Blake Griffin injury almost every playoff season. And
yeah, that is true.
Isn't that Chris Paul would go out with an injury too, like happened against Portland. I feel like with Chris Paul, there's still a lot of question marks for me on if he can deliver in the playoffs, even though he's doing so well when he is in the starting lineup with Houston. But we've seen a completely different Rockets team when he's not playing. I mean, when the Rockets played the Lakers in one of their games not too long ago, and Kuzma had the breakout game for almost 40 points.
Yeah.
And James Harden dropped 50 points, and Houston couldn't beat the Lakers.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is true.
That either tells you how good the Lakers can really be, and they're just not at that potential every night, or that tells you, without Chris Paul, this Rockets team could easily slip and be that kind of the team that does well, gets a high seeding, but then has trouble even in the first round. So I'm not entirely sold on the Rockets just yet. The Warriors, I feel like everybody assumed, they're going to be at the top. Who's really going to do better than them? But I personally had Oklahoma City as the top seed, merely because I thought that the addition of Paul George was really when we were going to see what Westbrook is really about. We've seen that, but it just hasn't translated to enough wins yet because of the chemistry still trying to work itself out. And I do think if you didn't have Paul George's rumors swirling around the internet and around this NBA circles like you do with, is he going to go to LA? Is he even going to stay in with the Thunder when he's a free agent? Just all that speculation doesn't help chemistry at all because Westbrook doesn't seem really determined to make a pitch to Paul George. He's just kind of in that kind of whatever phase it seems like. Well, if he stays, he stays. If he goes, he goes. Russell Westbrook's going to rock with the Thunder regardless. If it was more of Paul George had maybe 2 years left on his deal, I think you would honestly see a team that wants to win now instead of just trying to figure it out as they go. They're still doing okay. I still think they're obviously a playoff-worthy team. And I do think you can see the Thunder do some damage in the playoffs if they can click, in the last half of the season. But I think this All-Star break is crucial for them because you have to think if you're Oklahoma City's front office and all you're hearing from league executives or breaking news reports or rumors from Wojnarowski on Twitter that the Lakers this, the Lakers that, Magic Johnson thinks this of Paul George, or Paul George really wants to play for his hometown family or hometown team like he talked about not too long ago either to the media. Do you make a deal for him now so you get something instead of just leaving with nothing like you got with Kevin Durant? I mean, they banked on Kevin Durant staying, and that bit them in the behind pretty good with him going to Golden State. They had to trade Harden because of the situation unfolding there. So, you know, they got to start thinking a little bit ahead. If it's not working all the way now, maybe we can make something work with the Lakers. And LA's been willing to trade a lot of their young core, so it wouldn't shock me if you kind of see a lot of moving around between those two teams because the Thunder know that's what the Lakers want in Paul George. And if LA is willing to give up someone like Clarkson or Randall or Nance or some combination of that, I don't see why that you don't pull the trigger on that and just see if that works. Try to make something happen with it.
I totally hear that. I'm surprised that you projected the Thunder to be the top seed in the West prior to this season. I didn't think they would be good enough to overthrow Golden State and especially San Antonio. You know, I can never bet against Pop same way.
We haven't even had Kawhi Leonard a full half season, and they've still done pretty good with this in San Antonio.
That's the thing.
That speaks to Pop. I mean, if they had Kawhi, you could argue they could be a top seed. If Kawhi Leonard's playing how we know Kawhi Leonard can play, he's crazy on both sides of the ball. I mean,
exactly.
My thing with the Warriors, though, if I can real quick, the reason I thought that the Thunder, and I still think they have a chance to do it, maybe not as strong as preseason when everyone starts at 0-0. But for me, I thought that maybe this year is when the chemistry unfolds for Golden State because you had Steph Curry come back as a free agent. He wasn't going to leave. You could talk about, going to Charlotte and all that stuff that people thought was a good rumor to talk about. He wasn't going to leave. There's no way you're going to leave and have to figure out how to work with Kemba Walker when you could play with Durant, Draymond Green, Clay, and everybody else and still have Steve Kerr to really coach you through those kind of situations that the Warriors find themselves in. But my biggest X factor was Klay Thompson. So you have Klay Thompson approaching free agency soon, and I know the Lakers kind of seem to have their hand in everything now. But think about it. If things really didn't work out for Golden State this year and you saw them kind of flop, I mean, Durant's going to do what he's going to do. Steph is going to bring a bunch of threes and ridiculous shots to the game. But they don't really have a crazy good big man that I think people are crazy about. And that could be their weakness in the playoffs. And I think you're going to see that more this year than any of the previous runs that they've made. But Klay Thompson at some point is going to get sick of playing third fiddle to Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. That's just my thoughts on the whole situation. It's one thing to be, the sidekick, right? Or to be the alpha male in the room with the other guy. But that KD's signing with Golden State took that right out of Klay Thompson's hands, and he didn't even have a say in that. It went from Splash Brothers to Splash Triplets, and he doesn't want to be. Why would he want to be the third wheel? They figured it out so far, but I don't think that's going to last past this season. You're going to see Klay get frustrated. I mean, you're going to see it probably more in the playoffs than anything, because they're going to make the playoffs, but those late moments aren't going to go to Klay anymore. They're going to go to Kevin Durant or they're going to go to Steph.
I get what you're saying, but I have to disagree. The reason being, last year's his finals performance, where you look at the past 2-3 finals, Klay hasn't shown us what Klay can do in the finals, meaning that he has not been consistent offensively. However, when you look back, especially last year's finals, even when he's cold offensively, right, if he was anybody else, the coach would have pulled him from the game.
Right.
But because of what he brings to the defensive side of the ball, you keep him in, and it's just like, hey, you get your shot, shoot it. It doesn't matter if you make it or miss it because you're able to still impact the game defensively. And I think for me, at the end of the day, you got to remember this is a business. Players are getting paid to play. I would like to think that egos get pushed aside so Golden State can make their own dynasty. I mean, you look at it; they've been to three straight finals. They've
But can
won
you really
two of
call it
the
a
three.
dynasty though?
You can't call it. You can call it a dynasty if they go back to the finals next year. If they go to the finals this year, next year, going to the finals five straight times and winning, let's say, three or four of that five, I
Yeah.
would call them a
Then you could
dynasty.
start talking about it, but not now.
But that's what I'm saying though. You have the potential to build that dynasty if you put egos aside. So that's what I'm thinking in terms
That's
of
a
Clay. I
big if
mean,
though.
he said it prior to the season that he wants to stay in he wants to stay in Golden State. But mind you, things change from then and now. I would like to think that those guys, in my opinion, they're going to the finals this year anyway. And regardless of whether it's Cleveland or the Celtics, I think the Warriors still win the finals. So I think they get championship number 3 this year. And then you enter the off season. Are these guys willing to? All right, let's. I want to chase that check. I mean, for some of them, yeah, you won 3 rings in 4 years. You're set. You can
Right.
now just look for that next big paycheck.
Yeah, you could
For
go
others,
at that point.
exactly.
At that point, Milwaukee's attractive.
Yeah, right. It's like, hey, let's go
They'll throw
build
money
the
at
three
you.
three.
You're like,
To
okay,
be
sign
honest,
me up. I don't care. I'll play
exactly.
for the Bucks.
But it's just what the Golden State as a whole, what they're able to do. I mean, you look at that roster. You have an aging Sean Livingston, an aging Andre Iguodala, an aging David West,
Right.
and all three are still providing you great minutes. They are still making such an
That's true.
impact,
That's
and
true.
they're relatively doing it for cheap too. Even though with how they're performing, they can get a slightly bigger contract elsewhere for sure.
Hmm.
But with them just recently giving Curry his max deal, Durant took a pay cut, even though he's a player who can get top dollar.
Right.
Draymond is going to be due for his extension soon, and he's a guy that deserves a good amount of money, and Clay for sure deserves a good amount of money, if not for his offensive skill set, but for his defensive capabilities.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just me thinking too highly of a human being, but I'm thinking they are willing to put their egos aside in order to build a dynasty. When you look at the West, the Western Conference has always been seen as a tough conference, especially in recent years.
Right.
But you have an opportunity to be part of a team that has continuously won the West, has continuously held a stranglehold, and arguably has had the best record in the West
Hmm.
for several years in a row. Are you willing to throw that aside to chase a check or because of ego?
Yeah.
We'll see.
So the last little bit I wanted to talk to you about is maybe a team on the bottom end of things, maybe fighting for an 8 spot or way below at the bottom. What's a team that's surprised you in the Western Conference and why?
Repeat that again for me.
What's a team that's surprised you in the Western Conference that's maybe fighting for one of those 8 or 7 seeds or is out of the playoff picture at the moment? But what's a team in the conference that surprised you for maybe a bad reason?
A team that surprised me maybe for a bad reason has really been the Mavs. Um, it's crazy what's going on in Dallas in terms of their inability to win games. Um, Especially just given what they were able to do in recent years. Especially, I think it was 20, 2011 when they won the title with
Yeah.
Dirk and Dirk being such a great player. The fact that you have the Mavs sitting at 15 and 28, fourth worst in the West. I'm just shocked. I wasn't expecting them to be, top four seed, but I was expecting to probably hover in that 6 to 8 spot.
Yeah.
And they are just really bad this season. And it's disheartening for me because I'm a fan of Dirk. And, Dirk has been one of the most selfless players in the league, constantly taking pay cuts in order for Mark Cuban to put pieces around him to help them contend to help them contend in the playoffs. And you're not going to see that this year. And he's aging.
Right.
He hasn't been. We just heard me give a spiel about chasing the check and whatnot. He has not done that.
And he's not going to get younger at all.
Exactly, he's not getting younger. He no longer has that leverage of saying, "Hey, I'm Dirk. This is what I bring. I can get that money." It's like, well, Dirk, you're older now.
I do think they have a good future in Dennis Smith.
Yeah, I agree.
My concern is if he becomes a poor man's Russell Westbrook, where he's explosive, he can get to the rim and finish really well. But is he going to be an X factor like you've seen Westbrook be in Oklahoma City? I mean, the thing about playing style is Westbrook has to average a triple-double for us to talk about it. If he didn't average a triple-double, he'd be a ball hog and the Thunder would suck. If he's not getting it out to these all-stars like George and Anthony and they're not knocking down shots, that's going to affect his stat line, I do like Dennis Smith Jr. a lot, though. I mean, he comes out with, I would say, the most confidence of the rookies so far, especially in his situation, not having, I guess, a clear direction when he got drafted of what the team was going to actually be capable of. Whereas like LA, you have obviously the goal to make the playoffs or figure out a young core. If you look at Jason Tatum in Boston, he's got pieces around him. He's had to step up with the Hayward injury, obviously, but he had Jaylen Brown. They added Kyrie Irving, Al Horford as the big man. That team already had depth to it. Dallas, they drafted Smith as kind of not their savior, but really, if this is going to work out, if we're going to really rebuild this team, you have to be basically the first piece of that puzzle. But yeah, I think if he can find a way to take over and make that team his own whenever Dirk decides to hang it up, that's really when they're going to be able to turn the page. Because unless Dirk calls it quits and retires as a Maverick, that team's going to have a hard time moving on. And you saw that with Kobe Bryant. LA had those pieces. They had D'Angelo Russell and Jordan Clarkson trying to figure things out. But because it was all about Kobe retiring, that whole season basically went to crap. You're not going to have like that same crazy retirement tour with Dirk, I don't think. He doesn't seem like that kind of dude. But that distraction of having an all-time great veteran on your team, still as old as he is going to take away from Dennis. And, Dallas has to realize that at some point to try and get better.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see what happens, how the second half of the season plays out.
Right.
But before we really wrap it up, too, I'm definitely looking forward to the All-Star game. It's going to be in LA this year.
Right.
Might try to float around the area, but I'm excited to see how the captains will pick their teams. Because right now, I think it's Curry and LeBron who are looking to be the team captains.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're only human. We love drama. We love good storylines. So who will LeBron pick as his point guard?
I think
he'll go with Westbrook. Will he go with Kyrie?
I think he'll pick Kyrie.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see how things go.
Definitely. I think that really puts the power back in the players' hands, because when you have the fans voting all of the time, baseball had this problem maybe 2 seasons ago, I think it was, and they had all these Kansas City players making the All-Star team when other players were kind of deserving of spots. When you have captains that pick their own teams, I think it's going to be much more watchable, because I feel like the NBA All-Star game is kind of that game that there's no weight to it. There's no gravity to it. It's just kind of a festivity. And now that you have the drama mixed in with that, I don't know if they'll ever add like an incentive like baseball does, where whichever league wins, you get to have home field advantage in the championship. If they had something like that, then I think you're going to have even more fans really want to know what happens, especially if you pick a team,
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that was fun episode 2. I think I was about the same time, maybe a little longer than the first one, but uh, weren't able to have Corbin on. He got tied up, but we're gonna have him on next episode for sure. And he probably has the hottest takes out of all 3 of us, so definitely gonna need him on, because he's a Patriots fan, and I know you're probably listening, Corbin, but go Jags. That's all I'm gonna say. All right, that's gonna do it for me and Abraham. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.
All right, take care.